Well, good afternoon, Mayor. My name is Maria Guadalupe Martos, and I am a political journalist for our Las Cruces. And before we get started today, I just want to know how you're doing. How's the family? How's your team? How's everyone on your
So
end?
far, they're doing pretty good, thank you. Yeah, so we've been pretty fortunate. We had a late night last night, and early morning this morning, but doing okay so far.
The first question I have for you, Mayor, is what are some of the political challenges that you faced during this pandemic? Have there been roadblocks, or has there been any unexpected things that have happened in the process navigating through the situation?
Well, yes, there's obviously nobody likes to have things restricted. And when we do that in the interest of their safety and well-being and that of our fellow residents as well. So for example, and I often remember the waiting in line to vote I think it was in Wisconsin, and you could see people there, some wearing masks, some not wearing masks. And shortly thereafter, determined that there was about 16 or 19 cases that was a result of that. And so when we placed that requirement that you had to wear a mask to vote at City Hall, we knew that there were people who were going to complain, but we did it because we have to keep the public safe. And for the next few years, I've been fortunate to be chosen to at least lead that initiative and as mayor. And so I felt that was the right thing to do. And we were very fortunate that the ACLU came in and said, as long as we have masks available for those who didn't have one to vote, as long as they can have it, they didn't see a problem with it. So that was a big plus for us. So that's really the challenge, having to deal with people concerns that their rights are being somehow taken away. And I can understand that. But when they venture out into the public and other people who don't want to catch COVID-19, which obviously nobody wants to, where do their rights stop and the other ones begin?
Yeah. I think that's bothersome too, to think that we're taking away your right when we're honestly just trying to protect everyone. That statement has come not only from people in my circle, but also from individuals on social media that I follow. And I don't understand that statement personally. I have a hard time with that statement. I have a grandmother who I really care about, and I want her to be safe, and she loves going to church. I think it's important for us to think of our loved ones that could be affected by this type of disease.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the thing that I recognize, there are adults that are in good health. And I think when I try to put some restrictions on indoor dining as opposed to expanding outdoor dining, my whole premise or purpose for doing this was just that. I think a lot of times we think that everybody knows what the rules are or the suggestions that the CDC suggests to do, but not really. So what if someone who's never read this was to somehow be a carrier? They go visit their elderly parent or grandparent and unknowingly passes on COVID-19, and they should get seriously ill or perhaps even die. I can imagine that they would feel really bad about that. And so those are one of the big challenges there. We're not here to try to restrict anyone's rights or to try to use what people say that I might not be using my authority in the right way. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I understand. My second question for you, Mayor. Why weren't you contacted in regards to the opening of New Mexico by Governor Michelle Lujan's office to collaborate?
When was I contacted? I wasn't contacted. I read it in the media.
Do you know why you weren't contacted?
No, I
No.
don't.
No.
I have my suspicions, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would think that, well, this is me personally, as a leader of a state, I think it would be important to gather, other leaders in that conversation, especially since we are the second largest city in the
Sure.
state.
Yeah.
So since you weren't contacted, what steps did you take to make sure that you were protecting your city when the announcement was made?
Now, are you talking about the initial closure, or when they started reopening up the restaurants and things of this nature?
When they started to reopen, I believe it was phase 2 of the process.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. I hadn't seen the actual, although I have since seen it, but they were very, very broad points, to make. And I just didn't feel that went far enough. And the opening was that following Monday. And I thought, you know what, I really think these are going to be necessary to contain all the hard work that we've done so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that if we say 25%, it's like anything else. I don't know how your driving habits, but if the speed limit says 65 or 70, some people won't usually drive 75. So if the limit said 25, I can only imagine they probably 35-ish. You know what I mean. So maybe even more. I mean, I can tell you right now, I've driven by a few restaurants, and it sure looks like that parking lot is full. Do I turn them in? No. I'm just hoping that they adhere to best practices and try to keep people safe. But
there's only so much we can do to help.
Sure.
Right. Do you have any advice that you could share with mayors of similar towns from your experience here in Las Cruces? Are there best practices you've been following?
Again, yes, the CDC does have their guidelines, but I like to look at them as minimum guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
I not a day goes by, although it's not as much as it was earlier, but I would watch a lot of documentaries. And I think the one that resonates with me the most was a documentary on indoor filtration systems. So if you stop and think about it, our air conditioner systems, especially like in the car, is recirculated, constantly recirculated. Also in an airplane, it's recirculated. So I remember seeing this documentary about when you're inside the restaurant or any building, that the air is constantly being recirculated, and so people who may have COVID-19, even if they're 10 feet away or 15 feet away, if they cough and that somehow gets recirculated, it's just like a roundabout way you're going to get it, or you may be exposed to it.
Yeah.
So that was my whole premise for suggesting more outside dining than inside. Because outside, I don't know, if it were me and I had a restaurant and I had the parking, there are some restaurants that have a lot of parking available, that's where I would go. I would make it the best dining experience and for the public to feel safe. Because if you really stop and think about it, I don't know, let me ask you a question. Have you gone to eat at a restaurant lately? Indoor?
Yeah.
You have.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other people there?
Yes.
Would you have preferred if you were there by yourself? You and your guests or guests?
Definitely.
Yeah, that would really that's the ultimate dining experience. Hey, I don't have to worry about anyone if you're coughing or if someone's coughing on you. And if you could somehow replicate that outside, and if the parking lots are large enough, and you never know. Let's say you have some these misters, the spray mist, and you have a nice umbrella setting, and you're kind of secluded. I would think the public would say, hey, I think I want to go there. I think I'd like to go there. That looks like it's safe. I think I can take my family. and we can enjoy this meal and not having to really worry about anyone or any air circulating. And you could have, I mean, you can, and granted though, in all fairness, restaurants are it's tough. It's a tough business. There's a lot of money that businesses haven't been able to collect because of them being shut down for a bit. And so, you know, but if you had those type of fans and the little mist, you know, kind of cools you down. I don't know. That's just my thinking. That's just, and not all restaurants can have that. Also, drive-through windows really help out a lot.
Thank you for sharing those best practices with us. And we have a few more questions for you. Do you have any advice for any medical personnel, hospitals, doctors, or care facilities that may be considering partnering with local governments? Is there anything they can do to enhance the communication process and make sure that everything works as seamlessly as possible?
First, I'd like to just thank them, each and every one of them, for their service. You know, it's amazing how sometimes it takes a situation such as this, to really realize how important they are. They have now just shifted to the front lines like our first responders did during 9/11. Now this is the 9/11 for healthcare workers, and they're there fighting the good fight. And some of them, unfortunately, do catch COVID-19 and may not make it. So I like to say thank you for their heroism for what they do. What can we do to work partners with them is to let us know if they don't have the right PPEs. I mean, they're so valuable to us that if need be, cities can acquire it for them and give it to their respective hospitals or healthcare facilities, wherever they're at, so that they can have these necessary equipment to make sure that they're not only safe, but that their families are safe as well. And if they need anything, like for example, an area where they can change and leave their equipment there at home, so that when they go home, that they feel safe, that they're not a carrier to their family. You know, we need to do our best to make sure that they're safe, because they do so much for us.
Yes, yes. What will our new normal look like in Las Cruces for the next 12 to 18 months?
Is this if they find a vaccine or without a vaccine?
Well, I know that the doctors are saying that it's going to take 12 to 18 months. So I would say until we find the cure and vaccine.
Goodness. A lot of Zoom meetings like what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Very little contact with one another other than, perhaps wearing some type of gloves or mask. I don't see a whole lot of activities being outside or large crowds. I will admit I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to, I love Aggie football. I love Aggie basketball. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to be able to go there and still root for our team and still be part of that live action. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
It's going to be a real challenge. I don't know. I don't know. I hope that they can get a vaccine quicker, so that we can all kind of return to a somewhat normal life. But in the meantime, we just have to stay the course and do our best to keep ourselves, our families, and others safe.
So my question for you, why was the COVID-19 dashboard installed so late for the city? Was there a lot of prep that was going into it, a lot of research?
Well, if I may ask, when you say why was it installed late, can you give me some comparisons to other cities that actually had them sooner?
Sure. So we did experience, witnessing what was going on in the Eastern Corridor and what was going on in other parts of our country. And so obviously those cities and states had to kind of hustle and get it quickly done for their people. And what we've witnessed here with Las Cruces, it was just a little bit slower in the process. And I mean, my assumption is that we weren't having much of a problem here as other states, but it obviously was a problem, assuming that people were still traveling and going outside of the state and things of that nature.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I feel that we were able to provide information in a timely manner. And also we were kind of reliant on the state and their Department of Health because, you know, we've never experienced this before. We turn to them for that type of leadership to see exactly what type of information are we going to be able to gather, because the information was really going more toward the state. And I'm not trying to place any blame on them, because I think the Michelle Lujan Grisham's administration has done a fantastic job in dealing with COVID-19. But and as soon as they started getting the information, then we knew what we could place on our dashboard. And so, in all fairness to the state of New Mexico and the city of Las Cruces, I felt that we did pretty good.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. In addition to this COVID-19 crisis, we've experienced an awareness of extreme racism issues in the city's departments. What is your message about the issue? And I did see that you made a public announcement as well via Facebook, and a message that you published after the George Floyd incident. So I want to kind of pick your brain and see what you're feeling as far as that issue goes.
Yeah, that was a senseless killing of Mr. Floyd, and I hope that we're able to use this as an opportunity to really talk to America and let them know that, you know, this is unacceptable, and not just Mr. Floyd, but others. And hopefully there will be no more. But we recognize that this is something there that's we have to go to the systemic root of racism and what causes it. You know, as a young boy growing up here, there's not that many with a Japanese last name. And, you know, I would experience it as well. And, you know, I had my ways of dealing with it, but nonetheless, nothing compared to what my neighbors or friends who African-American and others that deal with that. And so it's a situation that we have to, as parents, we have to counsel our children who eventually grow on to be adults. And that's one thing that I have to really credit today's youth. I think, what do you call yourselves, millennials? I don't know what the new term is. Is that what it is, millennials?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, I'm really proud of the fact that they have it was this generation that has finally said, you know, this is enough. Where is this coming from? And because you look at the other generations, you know, I don't know if they, you know, they did recognize it. Like, keep in mind, I you know, realized that during the 60s and 70s, civil rights is where it was coming about, and many of those true heroes, especially Martin Luther King, who basically gave his life to promote and further racial injustice. But it was this generation that, you know, they're the ones that are really taking it on and you know, head on. So it's good. You know, we need to do that. We need to change that. I mean, we all inhabit this great earth, and, you know, we all, to my knowledge, all have our blood is red, you know, and we may have different skin tones, pigmentations of our skin, but you know, we breathe the same air, and we all want the best for our families and our children. And you know, we have a great world. We have a great country. We shouldn't. There's a lot of other things that we need to enjoy instead of having to try to make one self appear more higher than the other.
I agree. Recently in my research, I stumbled across the eugenic scientific movement that happened in the 1800s. And it was very interesting to me that was a scientific, you know, movement that a lot of politicians, you know, backed up and believed in, and America being one of those big, you know, supporters of that movement. And I think that we're still having to overcome a lot of that adversity and that, false scientific research that was done. And we have an obligation as a generation to right the wrongs and identify what the real scientific explanation is to why our pigment changes and why people are different in certain areas of the world. It's all climate. It's all something that we have the capacity of learning and relearning. And I think we need to make that effort, all of us.
Yeah, interesting.
My last question for you, Mayor. What advice do you have for the members of our community in this time?
Well, from the COVID-19 aspect to, if they feel ill or sick or running a temperature above 100, to stay home. If they go outside and deal with the public, please consider wearing a mask. That's the responsible thing to do. That's the courteous thing to do. If they're a healthcare worker, thank you for all that they do. And also just to know that, when you think back about the Spanish flu in 1918, they got through it. And if you think about how many advances we are in today's modern 2020, if that group and generation could deal with it and get through it, and we will. It's just, we just have to be patient. We have to be supportive of those that are working to find a cure, working to find best practices to keep us all safe. And really just let them know that this generation of 2020 America is got to be, smarter than it was in 1918, almost 100 years ago generation. I mean, we have so much more technology, so much more people with those type of opportunities to find a cure. We have so much more, and I know we'll get it done.
Yeah.
America has gone through a lot, and they'll continue, and we'll find a way to get this taken care of.
Yes, we will. Mayor, thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this time for you to thank or commend any people that you'd like. And personally, I want to thank you for all the hard work you're doing for our community, for my family. All my family lives here, so it's important for our leadership to take all of the lives into consideration. And I think that our state has done a great job. I would have liked to seen it, happen a little bit sooner. We saw what was happening in the Northeastern Corridor. We know our people travel everywhere because their families live everywhere. So I would have liked to see, the ball rolling a little bit sooner. But from what I've seen and what I've witnessed, I think you guys are doing an incredible job.
Well, thank you, and I can't take full credit for that. Of course, this is a team effort. My colleagues were very supportive of me when I put through certain resolutions, and also helped me determine that, well, maybe this wasn't the best path to go down. So, we're a team. I just happen to be the one who gets to run the meetings, and but nonetheless, it's a team effort, and we couldn't be where we are without all my council members.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great one.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.